If we live in a society where people who want 2 kids systematically fail to achieve that, that's a bad thing.
People still say they want to have children, but they're like, yeah, I want to have kids if.
I think a lot of peer pressure comes into it as well.
I just can't buy this sort of like hand-wringing about the birth rate. Like, it just feels so reactionary.
Hey, it's Julie, and this is Top of Mind, where we tackle tough topics with nuance and an open mind. We're out to become better citizens, kinder neighbors, and more effective advocates. I'm sure by now you've seen the headlines about the fertility rate hitting an all-time low in the United States. An American woman is now estimated to have 1.6 children during her lifetime. It's a big deal when a country dips below what's called the replacement rate of 2, meaning a woman has 1 child to replace herself and 1 to replace her partner when they die. Below that rate, a population shrinks without immigration, which could mean a shortage of workers for a country's economy and a shortage of funding to care for its aging population. But every wealthy nation in the world and global giants like China, India, and Russia have now fallen below the replacement fertility rate. And some have been there for much longer than we have. So what's driving the decline in America? Should we try to reverse it? If so, how?
I'll be known as the fertilization president, and that's okay. That's not bad.
President Donald Trump touted his hopes for improved access to in vitro fertilization while celebrating Women's History Month in March 2025. Vice President J.D. Vance put the administration's vision much more directly.
So let me say very simply, I want more babies in the United States of America.
He was speaking at the anti-abortion March for Life in January 2025.
I want more happy children in our country. And I want beautiful young men and women who are eager to welcome them into the world and eager to raise them. And it is the task of our government to make it easier for young moms and dads to afford to have kids, to bring them into the world, and to welcome them as the blessings that we know they are here at the March for Life.
So far, that plan has included appointing conservative Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe v. Wade, boosting the child tax credit by $200, and establishing a $1,000 investment account for babies that can be accessed when the child turns 18. President Trump has talked a lot about making IVF free, but so far he's only encouraged health insurers to cover it. Opponents of President Trump worry his administration's true intent is to return to a time when contraception was harder to get and women were traditional or trad wives, focused mainly on domestic roles. Critics also point to voices within the Make America Great movement who link the need for more babies to a desire for America to also be more white and more Christian. Today on Top of Mind, we'll hear a range of views on this, and we're going to spend a lot of time with women who've made different choices about fertility. In fact, it was one of our listeners, Heidi Thorpe, who reached out saying, "Hey, have you thought about doing something on the declining fertility rate?" And I immediately replied, yes, but what I really want is to find a mother and daughter who could help us explore the generational differences at play here. And Heidi made that happen by introducing us to her friends, Janie and Melody.
Hi, I'm Melody. I am 61 years old and I have 12 children.
I'm Janie, and I have 3 children.
And how old are you?
I am 35.
Janie is Melody's middle child, the 5th of 12. Their stories are unique to them, of course, but they're also a vivid illustration of the roller coaster the U.S. fertility rate has been on in just a few generations. Melody was born in 1964.
My mom had 8 children. I am the baby of the family.
At the point of Melody's birth, the baby boom had just ended, and the U.S. fertility rate was plummeting from a high of nearly 4 babies per woman in 1960 to a new low of just 1.7 births by the mid-1970s. The civil rights movement, the feminist movement, and widespread availability of the new birth control pill all contributed to women having fewer babies. But the decline was slower to reach religiously conservative farming communities like the one in northern Utah where Melody grew up.
All the neighbors, I think, had, 6 to 8 children.
And Melody figured she'd have at least that many of her own someday. The first came faster than she imagined.
I was 15. I had actually started dating a guy when I was 13.
He was the cousin of her sister's boyfriend, 5 years older than Melody, not a member of her faith. But her mom okayed it since the sisters were double dating.
And she said, well, if you two are together, you'll be okay. And that was wrong. I was 13 years old. So I ended up dating my first husband for a year and a half, and then things just kind of worked around, and I let my guard down. I got pregnant, and...
I mean, you also have to admit, your mom was not frank about,
No.
anything. Any type of sexual anything was not talked about.
No, it was not.
So it's not like you knew that these advances is what was leading to it. It's not like you could really put a name to it.
And Melody was part of a national trend. American teens in the 1970s and 80s were increasingly sexually active, and unwed teen pregnancies pushed the fertility rate back up to 2 births per woman. Melody married her older boyfriend and gave birth to her first child in 1979, when she was still in high school. Her second was born
when I was 18, right after I graduated high school. I did want to have another child because I wanted to have a sibling for my first. Looking back, I should have waited a year. My mother was very angry with me. But, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So my husband was kind of like the ladies. He started having affairs and that kind of thing. And so our marriage started to disintegrate after that.
Melody was 2 weeks pregnant with their third child when her husband asked for a divorce.
I look back on that and I can't regret it at this point in time because I have 3 amazing children. 3 amazing children. Experiences that have helped me in my profession and a lot of understanding. So I can't say that it was bad at that time. It's just helped me be the person I am today. So, but my second marriage, I definitely, being married to a man who really enjoys children and loves children, we chose not to do birth control at that time. And most of those children came, approximately every 2 years. And it was really good.
Did you have in mind when you would stop?
No, I did not. In fact, Janie's laughing. No, I didn't even think about it. And the only thing that changed was, after I got to 9 children, I was a midwife. I was trying to do homeschool with my children. My father-in-law had had a stroke. He was living with us. My mother-in-law was there. It's very difficult when your in-laws are living there, I just remember praying very diligently for 2 weeks, like, Heavenly Father, am I through? Because all of the social cues are telling me I'm done. I shouldn't have any more children. And about 2 weeks after, my husband had a dream that he was in the cemetery digging a hole 6 feet deep, 3 children standing to the side of it. It was raining, and they're all begging him, please, Daddy, don't do this. He woke up in the middle of the night, and I knew exactly that was the answer to my prayer, that I was to have 3 more children.
So she did. And when her youngest was barely a year old, her husband died of cancer. Newly widowed with 10 of her 12 kids still living at home, Melody started working full-time as a midwife.
God provided. And there's a lot I probably missed now that I'm older and my kids are telling me stories and I'm like, what?
What do you remember, Janie?
She was around and came to a lot of things. I do remember that. But there were times where she was gone, and it was hard.
Yeah.
The oldest one was always in charge.
I was 14 when my mom had, the youngest child, and I Within 2-3 years of my dad passing, I was the head of the household, I'd like to think.
Janie's really good.
By the time Janie was born in 1990, the national campaign to end teen pregnancies was working. Births to unwed teenagers dropped dramatically. But overall fertility in the United States was holding steady at that magic replacement rate of 2 births per woman. Janie planned to have a lot more.
I always thought I would have 6 children. I loved growing up in a large family.
First, though, she wanted to get her nursing degree.
Especially seeing how my father passed away. If anything ever happened, I wanted to be able to provide for my family. And I didn't want to be dependent on someone else to provide.
It was during Janie's college years that the Great Recession hit, and the U.S. birth rate started the steady decline it's been on ever since. Janie was finished with school, working full-time, and had been married for a couple of years when she had her first baby. She was 27, which is the average age for a first-time mom in America today, but
I would have thought I would have had my first child way sooner.
What went into the decision to have the first child 2 years after your marriage?
So I changed jobs probably 6 months after I got married due to location. And then ultimately maternity leave would not be provided for unless I worked there for a year. So we did more family planning because of my job.
Were there any other financial considerations?
Finances is a huge thing. You can't really live in a home now with just one income. And so ultimately, I think a lot of it becomes you can't choose to have another one when someone's going to work to pay for the childcare, because that's so very much. It costs so much.
How have you managed to continue working while also having your children? And your husband has worked full-time throughout that period?
I work every other weekend, and I work night shift. And then we have a family that are close by that help us out as well.
The one thing that we haven't even talked about is the financial cost of having a child. If you do not have the insurance provided by a job or, something, a lot of people will have to go on Medicaid or that kind of thing, and that can really affect, because if you're left with the burden of, a $20,000 or $30,000 or $50,000 just to have a child, it's overwhelming. You're not going to do that very often.
And then there's infertility. A growing percentage of women in the U.S. between the ages of 15 and 49 report difficulty becoming pregnant or carrying a pregnancy to live birth. Some of that is related to women waiting longer to have children in the first place. It took 4 years before Janie and her husband were able to have their second child, and they assumed that was it. But their youngest arrived 2 years later.
He's what we like to call our happy accident.
Okay. And at that point then, was it an intentional choice? We're done at 3.
Yeah. I think a lot of peer pressure comes into it as well. I mean, at work, there are definitely comments about people who've had more than 4 children. They just...
This is even in a medical setting, among nurses.
Yes, there's still comments about oh my gosh, they keep popping them out, things like that. Yeah.
I'd love to hear from both of you, because Melody, you deliver. You're still actively midwifing, right? Midwiferying. Actively
midwife.
I'm being a midwife. Yes. What aspects of what women today are facing in these choices? What aspects do you empathize with in particular?
I understand that the desire to have a really nice house, clean atmosphere, and that a lot of people stress over that. And if you stress over those little tiny things, it can be very difficult, because you've got to go with the flow. The front room's not always going to have spick and span. It's going to have toys all over it sometimes, and there's going to be a pile of laundry. And could I have been on top of it a little bit more? Probably. But they got fed. We did have a clean house at times. I empathize with how hard it is to have a baby, because sometimes just how difficult it is to have a baby. makes the decision whether you have another one or not.
You mean physically?
Physically, some women have very difficult labors, and that makes all the difference. One of my goals as being a midwife was to help ease people and help them so that there's ways that they can have easier births, and therefore they might have just one more child.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights.
Yes, thank you.
One of the most surprising things I learned about the fertility rate while working on this episode was this.
We have various polls that show that the ideal family size is still 2 kids, maybe even 3 kids. There really seems to be a gap between what people want and what people are actually able to do.
What would it take for more Americans to have the children they want to have? That's next on Top of Mind from the BYU Radio Podcast Network. I'm Julie Rose. Hey, it's Julie, inviting you to embark on a whimsical journey with The Appleseed from the BYU Radio family of podcasts. Immerse yourself in captivating stories, expertly woven by talented storytellers. Join host Sam Payne and the live studio audience in laughter and delight as they explore a tapestry of tales. Tune in to The Appleseed for a family-friendly experience that sparks imagination and brings stories to life. It's your ticket to fun and creativity. Find The Appleseed wherever you listen to podcasts. Just to quickly recap the trajectory of America's fertility rate, if you look at a chart going back to the 1800s, it's basically a downhill ski slope with one big mogul in the 1950s, followed by another slight bump in the 80s and 90s, and then back down again to the lowest point it's ever been, 1.6 births per woman today. So let's dig a little deeper into what caused those 2 fertility bumps and what lessons we might learn.
The baby boom was actually the real anomaly.
This is Karen Benjamin Guzzo.
I'm the director of the Carolina Population Center at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and I'm also a member of the sociology department.
It turns out that baby booms happened across Northern Europe and North America, basically all the winners of World War II after the war. Fertility in the U.S. shot up from 2 births per woman before the war to nearly 4 after, driven by a unique combination of government spending and public optimism, says Guzzo.
There were real investments made in suburbs, in healthcare, in education, in housing, in roads. Also pretty restrictive gender roles. So people, women didn't go to college at high rates. And if they went to college, they were just going to get their MRS degree, find a spouse, ring by spring. And most women and men married young. We had the kind of jobs where if you were a man, you could work in your local factory. You could find a job in lots of places where you didn't need an extra degree. And then, time passed and we started to have the civil rights movement and the feminist movement. We also had the introduction of the birth control pill, and we had deindustrialization where a lot of those good factory jobs disappeared.
And the birth rate slid back down from nearly 4 births per woman to a new low of 1.7 in the 1970s. Then came that second, smaller bump in the 80s and 90s, driven by teen pregnancies, which wasn't the way U.S. policymakers wanted to boost fertility, so there was a big push to prevent those. And still, the fertility rate hung on at 2 births per woman well into the 2000s, which was good news.
But when the Great Recession hit, economic contraction really just sort of hit everybody.
Economic trouble always lowers the birth rate, but it usually rebounds when the economy recovers. Not this time. Guzzo says the Affordable Care Act, aka Obamacare, played a role here because it made long-acting reversible contraception more affordable and accessible.
And so what we've really seen over the past 15 years is a big increase in people using IUDs or using implants and things that are basically set it and forget it, which makes it a whole lot harder to have an unintended birth. It also, however, means that you have to decide to get pregnant and you have to say, now is a good time for me. And that's what I think has happened since the Great Recession is, we had an economic recovery in the Great Recession. So the stock market went back up and the GDP improved. But if you were a young adult, just finishing high school or just graduating college in 2010, you were going to face a very different platform, landscape, trajectory that made it much harder for you to decide, yes, now I'm ready to have a child. And so We have various polls that show that the ideal family size is still 2 kids, maybe even 3 kids. People still say they want to have children, but they're a little more ambivalent or conditional about it. They're like, yeah, I want to have kids if I have a good job, if I can find the right person, if I can afford to live, move out of this small apartment and get a nice house in a good school district.
Have the norms around what it takes to be a good parent changed?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think yes, I think the standards to be a good parent for middle class families, and actually I think across the income range, have really ramped up, and that you should be thoughtful, that you should not harshly discipline your kids, that you should enjoy spending time with them. One of my colleagues did a series of interviews with young adults, and that was something that came up a lot, was not that they were uninterested, but rather they thought about it a lot. They really were like, I shouldn't be a parent because my parents were really crappy to me, and I would like to break the cycle. And so until I feel like I have figured out how to deal with those things, I probably shouldn't. But it wasn't a rejection of parenthood. It counters this notion that young adults are just selfish and they want to sleep in and get avocado toast all the time. It's actually that they're really serious about it.
What, if anything, worries you about the conversation that we're having right now in America? And what is the conversation you'd like us to be having?
I have huge concerns, actually, about this conversation about raising birth rates. I mean, if we really wanted more births, we wouldn't be having, and more Americans, we wouldn't be having conversations about stripping birthright citizenship. So this isn't just about births. This is about specific births to specific people. There's a lot of tensions right now in do we want to let single people have children? Do we want immigrants to have children? Do we want poor people to have children? Who should be having kids? And the work of child rearing in most industrialized countries is individual work. There's not a village for most people anymore. And so we're asking a lot of people, of women, to have births, and shaming them for not having births sometimes. And I think that's a real concern. So I'm agnostic to whether birth rates fall or rise or decline. I would like to see that people are able to have the families that they want. If they say they want to have 2 kids, I would like to see that happen. And then listening to what people say they need. They need childcare. They need a good income. They want to know that their jobs are safe. They can find a safe place to live that they can afford.
So, I mean, how much, for example, money would we need to give a couple, or guarantee them kind of for the long haul, in order for them to feel confident that they could pull this off and maybe be willing to have another kid?
Yeah, that's a good question. It would be to be honest, it would be a lot of money.
More than the $1,000 investment account for babies included in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, says Guzzo. More than the $5,000 baby bonus the Trump administration has proposed. And more accessible than the end-of-the-year credit on their taxes that parents currently get, which the One Big Beautiful Bill Act bumped up to $2,200 max per kid.
So what's interesting is that during the pandemic, we had something called the American Rescue Plan, which gave families with children money every month. It was super simple. Like if you had a child, you got the money. It was paid every month. You didn't have to file taxes. The administrative burden was pretty low. And it reduced child poverty by like 50%.
Didn't encourage people to have more babies, though.
No, because it was short. It went away by 2022, by the end of 22. It was short. But it didn't discourage marriage. It didn't discourage, employment. It was generally good for families. But then it went away, and that's what happens with it just flip flops. The other thing I think we would need that would go a long way besides paid leave would actually be a robust and publicly supported child care system.
Subsidized childcare comes up over and over again in this conversation. And by the way, if you want more on why childcare in the U.S. is so expensive and hard to come by, we did a whole episode on that. We'll put a link to that in the show notes. But several nations in Northern Europe, notably France and Nordic countries, are famous for their family benefits like subsidized childcare and paid parental leave. And their fertility rates are the same or lower than America's. Guzzo, though, thinks that shouldn't dissuade us.
The fact that our birth rate is on par with some of these countries that have much more generous family support programs than we do suggests to me that if we had something like that, like really robust investments, that we might be able to tick up birth rates a little bit. Not huge, so we would maybe go from this 1.599 that we have to maybe 1.7, 1.8. But that's not negligible because that is, hundreds of thousands of more births. But the other thing I would say is programs like paid leave, but especially in terms of childcare, pay off in other ways. So even if they don't budge birth rates, if we're worried about not enough workers because too few people are being born, we can't afford really to have women unable to work. We need women to be working. We need mothers to be working. And most mothers do want to work at some point. Maybe they don't want to work full time or they don't want to work the first year. But we have a pretty, we sort of, you either are or aren't. It's actually kind of hard to find good part-time jobs or jobs that let you leave for a little bit and come back. The other thing is a robust childcare infrastructure. High quality childcare is an early childhood investment. And we know from some of our evaluations of Head Start programs, which are childcare programs for low-income families, that they have pretty big return on investment. So if you get kids starting, learning their ABCs early, and you get them to start playing well with others, and doing these things, and you set them up for success in ways that they are ready when they hit kindergarten, and they're ready early on. Basically, what I'm sort of suggesting is if we're going to have fewer births, making the births and the people that we have, really investing in their human capital so they are the most productive possible future members of society is a good idea.
Karen Benjamin Guzzo is a sociologist and director of the Carolina Population Center at the University of North Carolina. Professor Guzzo, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
It seems like a catch-22 that a country with a declining fertility rate needs more women in the workforce, but more women in the workforce means they're having fewer babies. Except that in Europe, the opposite has been true since the 1990s. The countries with the highest rate of women working also have the highest fertility rates. France spent most of the last 20 years as the poster child for this phenomenon.
Many scholars or politicians from other countries were coming to us asking for the French secret. The idea remains in France very strong that whatever your life, the state will help you if you have children.
Laurent Toulemont is a leading expert on fertility trends at the publicly funded French Institute for Demographic Studies
in Paris, France.
Toulemont says that in the 1970s, France went all in on generous benefits to encourage women to have babies, regardless of their situation, married, single, rich, or poor.
And nobody would be blamed, for instance, for having too many children. If you cannot afford having too many children, the more children there are, the better. And work-life balance was here to allow women to have children, even if they wanted to work and if they went on working.
So the French government pays for 3 months of maternity leave, and that goes up to 6 months once a woman already has 2 kids at home.
This is a explicitly pronatalist policy to encourage people to go from 2 to 3 children.
The pronatalist policies also give fathers about a month of paid leave, and the first 4 days after the baby is born are mandatory.
For them to learn to take care of raising a very young child and to build a link between the father and the child. So this seems the most efficient way to have happy couples, happy families, and not too low fertility. Because women don't want to take the burden alone. So the idea is that fathers have to share the burden.
And parents can take up to 3 years of combined leave from work to care for their children while still protecting their careers. Childcare in France is heavily subsidized, and kids start all-day school at the age of 3. French parents also don't have to worry about saving for college because most universities are free. Plus, the tax benefits of having children are substantial, and they improve with each additional child. All of which has combined to keep the fertility rate in France consistently at or above 2 births per woman.
So I would say that the main lesson is be very aggressive in terms of gender equality. So on the one hand, allowing women to go on working when they have children with childcare, education, and on the other hand, forcing men to take care of their children. So that's lesson number 1. And lesson number 2 is being as inclusive as possible in terms of family policy.
But, and it's a big but, the fertility rate in France has recently dropped to just below 1.6 births per woman. That's the same as the United States, even though France spends 3.5% of its GDP on family policies, and we spend only 1.5%. Toulemont blames shifting norms primarily.
The ideal family size, it used to be 2 or 3, now it is more 2. If you want to travel or if you are afraid of the global warming, for instance, there are people who say that they can imagine their life as an adult without having children.
But Toulemont thinks cutting family support benefits would be a mistake.
You won't have children because the state asks for children. You will have children because you are confident in the support of the state on the long term.
Laurent Toulemont is a leading population expert at the French Institute for Demographic Studies in Paris.
We sort of joke about not being outnumbered, my husband and I, but I think there's some truth to that, right? That like one of us would always be responsible for childcare if we had more than one child, and that would prevent us from sort of living our fully actualized lives.
Coming up next on the show, one mother's decision to have just one kid, and a leading pronatalist addresses critics of the push to boost fertility. I'm Julie Rose. This is Top of Mind from the BYU Radio Podcast Network. We'll be right back.
Hey friends, if you are looking for another great show from the BYU Radio family of podcasts, check out Constant Wonder. Host Marcus Smith takes you on an exhilarating journey through captivating stories of our magnificent natural world. You'll gain profound insight into different facets of our planet, discover more about nature, and maybe even ponder your connection to Earth's wonder. The show is Constant Wonder, and you can find it wherever you get your podcasts.
My name is Mara Gordon. I'm a family doctor. I write the Substack called Your Doctor Friend, and I live in Philadelphia. I have one child. He just turned 4 last month, and he's the best. My spouse and I came to the decision sort of over time that we were going to be a one-child family.
What went into that decision?
I mean, it's so complicated, right? And this is so personal. So I think I want to say from the outset that I genuinely, in my heart of hearts, don't judge anybody else for their decisions. But for our family, it felt like a way for my husband and I to sort of maintain our identities sort of beyond being parents, but also embrace the new identity of becoming a parent. And so that there's one of us always available to do childcare if the other person has other things that we want to do, right? Whether that's work, whether it's social, whether it's hobbies, whether it's reading, that it sort of gives us a little bit of breathing room to feel like full selves sort of outside of our roles as parents. And yet, we are parents, right? And it's such a fulfilling part of my life. And I'm so grateful for my son. So it sort of allows us to have it all, as they say.
Do you think that it's a problem that women are having fewer children in America? Would you like to see us trying to encourage women to have more babies? Absolutely not. I think women should do whatever they want to do. And I think they should be fully supported in whatever those choices are. As a primary care doctor, I work in a low-income community of color, and I have been really humbled to learn about a feminist philosophy called reproductive justice. It basically says you have the right to have children, the right to not have children, and the right to parent children in a safe and healthy environment. And learning about this has helped me realize that like the framework that I grew up with and the norms that I grew up with around what it meant to be ready to have a family are really specific to like the culture that I grew up in, which was there's no question that you're going to college. Everyone in the family is a doctor. Like I never questioned if I would go to college. I just assumed I would, right? And that's not a privilege that many of my patients have. And I think learning about reproductive justice has given me so much empathy for, like for me, I felt like I needed to be in a stable partnership before I could become a parent, right? And many of my patients
actually don't live with the parents of their children. They live in matriarchal households, and they say, hey, I'd rather become a mom young because my mom is in great physical health. She can help parent the baby. We live in this sort of matriarchal household instead of in a two-parent, like nuclear family style living arrangement. And I have to say, there's a lot of advantages to that approach. And my goal as a doctor is to sort of give people the tools that they need to feel like they're making the decisions they want to make, right? So if that means contraception, it means access to contraception. If it means abortion, it means access to abortion. And if it means, being a mom at 19, if they feel ready, like, that's great, right? Like, how do we get you set up so that you have a healthy pregnancy, so that you have the resources that you need to be the parent that you want to be?
Why does access to abortion need to be part of that?
Because not all pregnancies are healthy, and people don't want to become parents if they're afraid that they're going to have a miscarriage and they're going to bleed out in a Texas emergency room because the doctors are afraid they'll be slapped with felony charges for helping somebody not hemorrhage to death from a miscarriage, right? That when abortion is illegal, pregnancy is less safe for all of us. And so without safe and legal abortion, becoming pregnant is quite dangerous. And safe pregnancies are imperative for, allowing people to have as many babies as they want to have.
Is there anything that could have been in place that would have encouraged you to have more than one?
Well, I can say for certain that the Trump administration's attempts are wildly out of touch with most women's lives in 2025 in the United States. In fact, I find them quite offensive and misogynistic.
In terms of?
Just the sort of trad wife, like promoting like women should be staying home, women should not have careers outside of the home.
I mean, the policies that they've bantered about, and in some cases begun to try to implement, right? So a payment, maybe $3,000, or upping the child tax credit.
It's a change. It's like a drop in the bucket. Do you know how much childcare costs? Okay. Yeah. I mean, it just feels like a slap in the face. Like, it's so silly. And I just can't buy this sort of like hand wringing about the birth rate. Like, it just feels so reactionary. Like, these old men want to go back to a vision of life that never truly existed, right? This sort of fictionalized make America great again. And it's rooted in misogyny, it's rooted in racism, and it's not the future I want for my child.
Mara Gordon is a family doctor in Camden, New Jersey. She writes the Substack called Your Doctor Friend. If you pull up any story online right now about this issue of declining fertility in America, you are likely to see Lyman Stone quoted. He's a leading voice in pronatalist policy. He's director of the Pronatalism Initiative
at the Institute for Family Studies. Just generally, I'm a demographer who specializes in fertility and family formation.
To say that he is frustrated with how pronatalism is portrayed by its critics in this current debate is an understatement.
Yeah, I'm aware that there are people on the left who are desperate to see conservatives as always being ist against some group, race, sex, whatever. Look, there are people who only want white babies to be born. 100%. They're not pronatalists, okay? When I go out and advocate for a bigger child tax credit, those people show up in my mentions being like, no, we should never increase the child tax credit. That'll support black babies. And guess what? They don't even identify as pronatalists.
So as a pronatalist, then what, maybe you could define for me what pronatalism is, what you stand for then, if you could summarize that.
Yeah, so I mean, at its base, pronatal just means more births. So if you're someone who thinks that it would, for some reason, on the whole, just be good if there were more babies, then you're a pronatalist, okay? I mean, in terms of what people who identify with pronatalism espouse, there's a lot of variety. You get people who espouse very strange and extreme positions, and in others. And for me, what I mean by pronatalism is simply people who believe that low birth rates are enough of a problem that government should take some kind of action to enable people to have more births. We have decades of good, high-quality surveys that ask people how many kids they want to have. And we see very clearly Americans still want, anywhere from 2 to 2.5 kids. If we live in a society where people who want 2 kids systematically fail to achieve that, that's a bad thing.
What if they're low income? And so some of what they'll be relying on to raise those children may be government support programs. Do we still want to encourage births at that level?
I mean, what I just said is that I think that government should increase its supports to help people have kids. So I am not opposed to people being reliant on government support. In fact, I've very publicly called for expanding the refundability and size of things like the child tax credit. So, empirically speaking, if everyone in the country had the number of children they want to have, a lot of the births that would happen, a disproportionate share of the births that would happen would be to lower income Hispanic women. I don't see a problem with that. Cool, they want to have babies and the babies are going to be Americans. I'm very in favor of that. Now, in practice, the people who actually have the very biggest gaps between their desired and actual fertility, if you really want to get into the weeds, are highly educated women.
In terms of what they want versus what they're actually having.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, look, you're not going to write a policy aimed at white women with graduate degrees. No one's doing that. No one's proposing that. Actually, the only people who kind of do propose that are the people who favor really generous childcare supports, because Hispanic families tend to prefer not to use public childcare for a variety of reasons. Immigrant families in general, actually. Whereas highly educated families, white families, make way heavier use of childcare programs. So oddly enough, these kind of liberal coded childcare subsidies are policies that are what you would do if you wanted to only encourage fertility among upper-class white families.
Lyman Stone says he would like to see the United States spending 5 to 10 times what we currently spend on family benefits. But rather than focus specifically on getting more births, Stone thinks we'd get more bang for our buck encouraging more marriage.
People are not marrying as young or at all as they were in the past. And what we can see over the last 15 years is that the birth rates of married women have not declined a lot. Just married people continue to kind of crank out babies more or less the way they have for 50 years, actually. Unmarried people have seen a fertility decline, which is partly improved contraceptives, so long-acting reversible contraceptives. But the biggest factor is just that there's so many more unmarried people. Okay? Reproductive age people, men and women, are just far more likely to be unmarried at any given age than they were in the past.
So is it an economic problem then? Or are people not marrying because, we all know what happened in 2007 to 2010, right? The Great Recession.
So there's definitely an economic component, particularly related to housing. We literally don't have enough houses of the kinds people want to raise families in for all the people who would want to raise families in them. Starter homes on small lots, a 3-bedroom on, a 1/12 of an acre lot. And we just don't build them anymore. And there's mostly regulatory reasons for that. Actually, most of the work we're doing at the Pronatalism Initiative right now is on housing policy.
So you think that there are couples out there who are we're just not going to have a second kid because we can't afford a house that feels comfortable with that extra kid?
I know for a fact that there are millions of those couples because I run regular surveys where we ask people, what are the concerns shaping your decisions right now about having another kid? And a lot of people say housing. There's also a non-economic factor. It does seem like cross-sex relations are breaking down. Young men and young women live in increasingly different worlds, probably thanks to essentially the internet, social media. There's growing sort of social withdrawal by young men. We see that increasingly they are politically at odds with each other. They vote for different parties. All these things mean that a given person is just a lot less likely to find a mate that is agreeable to them.
How does a government encourage marriage? What would those policies look like? And how is that different from encouraging births?
So when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Right now we have marriage penalties for an enormous range of means-tested programs. Okay, so the earned income tax credit, if two working class people get married, they will have a lower earned income tax credit benefit than if they stay single. This is true for temporary assistance for needy families, Section 8 housing, CHIP, Medicaid. Basically, every means-tested program punishes working class people for getting married. And we know from cases where like the eligibility rules changes or the benefit values change or something that marriage rates respond to these penalties. When you give people bigger marriage penalties, they don't marry as much.
What about access to reproductive assistance? Do you see that as playing a significant role here? So IVF, fertility treatments?
As far as IVF goes, no, I don't. And the reason for that is it's not an ethical question. It's that we have 5 or 6 studied cases now where like countries shifted the cost of IVF. Like a state added it as an insurance mandate, or a country started including it in their like public healthcare program. And what we see is that when places do this, it has no effect on fertility. It does increase the rate at which older women have first births, but it causes the rate at which younger women have first births to decline even more rapidly. So what's going on here is actually really simple. As people become more reliant on IVF in expectation, that is when they say, oh yeah, IVF will be there when I need it, they kick the can down the road. It's that simple. And if they have the first birth later in life, they then are less likely to have the second or the third. I will say there's a lot to be done on treating diseases that cause subfecundity or infecundity. The best cutting edge treatments for endometriosis are usually not covered by insurance. PCOS is pretty obviously at this point not just one disease. It's clearly a cluster of different conditions that we don't understand very well. Recurrent miscarriage. We have drugs that we think could do a lot to reduce recurrent miscarriage that are still not standard of care. They're not even new drugs. They're generics. They're available. Improved reproductive medicine. Yeah, we could probably add a lot of babies that way. And it's actually not that expensive.
One of the fears that some people have about the government trying to encourage more births is that would mean less access to contraception. And also less access to abortion, which an argument that I've heard made is that, and this is rather counterintuitive, having access to abortion care can mean that a woman is willing to take on the significant health risk of becoming pregnant because she knows that she has confidence that if she were to have a catastrophic miscarriage or some sort of major health problem, that there would be the care, often considered an abortion, that would end that risk for her. How do you respond to some of those concerns?
Yeah, the research on abortion, especially since Dobbs, where we have states that banned abortion so we can see what happened, is that banning abortion doesn't add a lot to fertility. It might add a little bit, but not a lot. In general, I think if you want to have abortion be legal, your argument should not be its effects on fertility. And if you want abortion to be illegal, your argument really shouldn't be its effects on fertility. Like abortion and contraception, like they may be important ethical issues for lots of people. I mean, I care a lot about abortion on an ethical front, okay? But like on the question of pronatal policy, like what will get you more births, these are just like, they're not on the radar.
I think kind of tying all of those pieces together, I guess there's, when you think about the history of births in the fertility rate in the United States, and we saw this big drop off when women became empowered in new ways to be able to go to, they began working, they had control over their reproduction when the pill became available. So is it possible to encourage more babies, encourage more marriage, and also empower women to work as much as they'd like to work, to have the jobs that they want to have, or to not work if they don't want to work, and have control over their bodies and their fertility?
There's no tension here. So think of it this way. Does it empower women to tell them that if you marry the father of your child, we will take away your child's health insurance? That is what we do with CHIP because of income eligibility rules and all that. There are a lot of women that if they marry the father of their child, their kid loses health insurance. Does that empower women? No, it doesn't. This is penalizing them for something that for some of them they might want. Does it threaten the empowerment of women to make the child tax credit twice as big? No. Does it threaten women's empowerment to abolish minimum lot size rules so that starter homes can be built? How does that threaten women's empowerment? Like, none of the things proposed as pronatal policy in the U.S. are any threat to women's empowerment. The reason it is brought up is pure political fear-mongering. And yes, I acknowledge people are afraid of this because fear-mongering works.
Yeah. Because the concern is, well, they haven't said it out loud, but they really do want to roll back access to contraception because they've already rolled back access to abortion.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm sure that there are some people who want to roll back access to contraception. It's a big country. They're never going to be an electoral majority. We'll put it that way. You can look at the contraceptive usage statistics and know that platform will never win.
And then there are folks, and then there's a fear that the only way this works is if we get more women to stay home from work, to have, like, we want fewer women in the workplace. And we're rolling back DEI. It's a tragedy if women are out of the workforce because they face discrimination. That is a bad thing. It is not a tragedy if women are out of the workforce because they wanted to stay home and raise children who are going to be productive members of society. That's not a tragedy. And I think that this is actually a really fundamental thing. We have to, like, this is basic, like, Cairo Declaration of Reproductive Justice, okay? If people want to have kids, they have a right to have them. It is anti-feminist to oppose them actually having them. Like, almost every country in the world signed on the dotted line that they agree with this statement, okay? Yeah, it might be that if we compensated families for the real value of the work of raising kids, then more women would choose to, or maybe more men. I mean, we have a growing number of stay-at-home dads, but it might be that more would choose to, quote unquote, stay home and quote unquote not work. But that's not because they wouldn't be working. It's because they would be choosing freely, without a gun to their head, to be compensated by things like the child tax credit to do the valuable work of raising children. Okay? I don't know where we get off on this idea that the work that women do at home isn't work. Just this week, there was huge news because Medicare pays literally millions of Americans to stay home and take care of their elders and make sure they get to their doctor appointments. Okay? And you know what? I don't think that's a bad thing. Why don't we pay parents to do that?
Lyman Stone, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Lyman Stone is director of the Pronatalism Initiative at the Institute for Family Studies, which is a think tank that promotes marriage, family life, and child welfare. So I was really surprised to hear both Lyman Stone, a conservative pronatalist, and Mara Gordon, the family doctor who's very critical of pronatalism, cite reproductive justice as an important framework. The idea that we should protect the right to have kids or not have kids and to raise them in a safe, healthy environment. I was not expecting that bit of common ground, but we actually heard versions of it in every conversation we did for this episode. So what's your view? Is there any government policy or social norm that would have changed the choices you've made about having children? Email topofmind@byu.edu to continue the conversation. I would love to hear from you. And make sure to subscribe to Top of Mind on your podcast app so you don't miss an episode. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a good review, that'll help other people find the show. And we love to see what listeners think about Top of Mind. Top of Mind is a BYU radio podcast. Today's episode was produced by Abby Karras and me with help from Isabella Sosa, Samuel Benson, and Sam Payne. Special thanks to Top of Mind listener Heidi Thorpe, who helped inspire this episode and introduced us to Janie and Melody. Our audio engineer is Hayden Thompson. I'm Julie Rose. We'll talk soon.